So at the moment, for tips that are paid to employees, it's governed by a code of conduct, which is not actually law, it's just an agreement type process. That'll be changed to be more strengthening on the laws on tipping by mandating consultation with workers to ensure fairer tip allocation. Whistleblowing protections come into play from April 26. The Fair Work Agency is to be established. That's a new agency that will enforce labour rights and promote fairness in the workplace.
Hello everyone and welcome to July's edition of Payroll Question Time. I'm delighted to be hosting yet another packed session full of insights, updates and discussion. Now today we're going to be diving into a number of key topics, from the employment bill roadmap and upcoming changes to parental leave, student loans, enforcement and compliance updates, and of course the latest developments from the SD Worx Academy. On the employment bill, we're going to look at what's coming in April 26 with statutory sick pay. We're going to discuss 0-hour contracts, maternity protections, and we're going to ask just how reliable are these roadmap timelines. And we'll ask all our panel for their input as we go along. We're also going to explore some student loan reforms, including the move to Plan 5 from 2025 and the implications for those in devolved nations, before turning to compliance issues such as the National Minimum Wage Enforcement and Fair Work Agency overlap. So loads to get into today. Thank you for joining us. Of course, if you have any questions, we've already got our first, which is great. Please do put it in the questions box, and we'll do our best to answer those in real time as we go through. There will be a poll today as well, so that's your chance to give your input, and we'll try and give our thoughts on those responses as they come through with our expert panel. And we are indeed recording the session as well, so you will indeed receive a copy of the recording and the slide deck after the show has finished. You don't need to be scribbling notes. We'll send everything through to you. It will also be republished as well on my show, which is the Payroll podcast. I believe June's edition went out earlier this week. So a little bit later, but a chance to catch up on all the essential issues affecting the world of payroll on the podcast show as well. Finally, you will get a survey at the end of today's episode. That's your opportunity to tell us what you want us to talk about in a future episode of PQT. So please don't waste that opportunity. If there's something we haven't discussed over the previous sessions, you're thinking, why haven't we discussed it yet? Or please can I have some support on a particular issue? That's your chance to let us know, and we'll do our best to accommodate your questions and your thoughts and your responses in the next edition of PQT. Last but by no means least, I am going to begin with a short legal disclaimer, which just says the presentation does not provide definitive answers to individual queries, and in some places takes views on matters which are uncertain. It is not intended to be relied upon in any specific context or as a substitute for seeking advice, legal or otherwise, on a specific circumstance, as each case may be different. Right, let's jump into today's panelists. We have a new panelist with us today as well, which I'll introduce to you in just a moment. My name is Nick Day. I'm the host of the Payroll podcast. I'm the founder of JGA Recruitment, we're a specialist payroll recruitment firm. I'm the recipient of the Global Vision 2024 Award and a member of the Reward 300, which I think most of my panel here alongside me are as well. That's enough about me, apart from the fact I get the chance to facilitate this wonderful show. I'm going to move from my right to left, starting with our newest member of the team today. Sam, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, new and old, I think. I'm Samantha Mann. I'm the payroll team manager at Armstrong Watson. I'm standing in for Karen today, so apologies from Karen. She can't attend. I first worked in payroll when I was 16, and well, if I tell you I'm 61 now, you could do the maths. I've been in payroll for a long time, and I've been very fortunate to work in a number of different roles. And as I say, now I'm responsible for the team training within the payroll service line at Armstrong Watson, and also managing the development of the apprenticeship program here at Armstrong Watson for payrollers. So I'm pleased to say that we've just had 3 very successful results for our latest apprentice going through endpoint assessment, and I'm looking forward to the next ones going through there. It's great to be here. Thank you so much.
Welcome. Great to have you back, I should be saying. Of course, I'll be giving all the most difficult questions to you first, Sam, as your part of your introduction and initiation. Anyway, moving towards our pensions and payroll expert, Andy Nichols.
Hi everyone. Worked many years in payroll and 12 odd years, maybe more, at the pensions regulator. Very keen to help everyone in terms of how pension operates in payroll. So looking forward to any questions you might have. Good to see you all.
And of course, our resident oracle, Simon Parsons.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be back. Simon Parsons, Director of Compliance Strategies. I'm no longer part of Reward 300, Nick. I'm now this part of this new thing that they've got in, which is called, is it Partner 50? So I've, is that for over 50-year-olds? I don't know, but Partner 50 instead of Reward 300. I first got involved in payroll in 1984. So I was just thinking, oh, that's 41 years ago, isn't it now? So in 4th of July, I joined Centrefile, and I deal with compliance strategies for SD Worx, write a lot, publish a lot, blog a lot, and am a general nuisance to various organisations, especially the government, in their consultations and groups like that. So it's good to be here. Good to have Sam back as well. Sam was there from some of the early day payroll question times.
Indeed. Sam, if you could just mute your mic for a moment, we'll do the introductions, just if that's okay for the audience feedback there on the cutback. Agree, Simon, you are indeed a nuisance to many of those governing bodies, but an absolute saviour to many of those that need answers to payroll questions on social media. So if you're on social media and you've been posting your questions on any of the major podcasts or channels like Facebook, LinkedIn, it's probably Simon behind the scenes that's been responding to them. So we are thankful for that as well. Anyway, moving along to Richard George.
Good afternoon, Richard George, Director of Education at the Payroll Centre. Yeah, I think Simon becoming a partner is a bit like going on the senior tour of golf. Perhaps that's what it is. I don't know. So I've only been in payroll since '85, so a year after Simon. So I very similarly do still sit on the 300 because I'm a lot younger than Simon. He says in his dreams. Sit on a number of government panels with a number of people on here as well. In relation to the Payroll Centre, we're the largest face-to-face training company in the industry and work very closely with the likes of CIPP, Simon and various other aspects on ensuring that the payroll businesses are supported thoroughly. That's probably the best way to describe it.
Super. And last but by no means least, I'm not sure Matthew was even born when Richard and Simon embarked on their careers in payroll, but Matthew, quick, could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Matt. I'm Policy and Research Officer at the CIPP, and yeah, I think I'm only just into the double digits of my payroll career, so very much the youngling of the team, but what I lack in experience, I'll make up for in enthusiasm. Unfortunately, I'm not part of the Reward 300, but our policy lead, Sam O'Sullivan, is, so we do have some representation on there. And like Simon and George, we sit on a number of government forums, making sure that government advocacy is sort of at the core of what the policy team does, making sure we're representing the industry.
Super. Well, look, let's dive into today's discussion topics. We've got a lot to talk about today, and a lot of this has been guided by our audience of things they wanted us to cover, and others have been guided by developments since last PQT. So today we're going to be talking about the Employment Bill Roadmap, changes to parental leave, student loans, enforcements and compliance, some other hot topics in Q&A. So please do put your questions in the box in real time. Just to remind everybody, the questions you put in the box do not have to be related specifically to the topics we're discussing. If you have a burning desire to ask a question, please do put it in there and I'll find a useful time or relevant time to bring it up to our audience. So let's kick in with our first subject then, the Employment Bill Roadmap. I'm going to come to Simon to kick us off with this one. Give us a bit of an overview if you can, Simon, and let us begin PQT.
Yeah, okay. Yes, so a few weeks back, the DWP or whoever it was, I'm trying to think, the employment DBT, wasn't it, brought out its roadmap of delivery of the Employment Rights Bill. So I'll try and go through some aspects of what that means. So for April 2026, collective redundancy protective award, the maximum has been doubled of what that is. Day one paternity leave and unpaid parental leave rights come into play. Whistleblowing protections come into play from April 26. The Fair Work Agency is to be established. That's a new agency that will enforce labour rights and promote fairness in the workplace. The announcements on statutory sick pay, so the moving of the lower earnings limit and the waiting period goes, so that's coming in from April, and the package of trade union measures including simplifying trade union recognition and process and electronic and workplace balloting. That's all the fun. And then they've announced some other items. So for October 2026, so just over a year away, ending unscrupulous fire and rehire practices. We remember the P&O case and others. So that'll be ended, that practice being permitted in any form. Regulations to establish the Fair Pay Agreement, adult social care negotiating body in England. The tightening of tipping law. So at the moment, for tips that are paid to employees, it's governed by a code of conduct, which is not actually law, it's just an agreement type process. That'll be changed to be more strengthening on the laws on tipping by mandating consultation with workers to ensure fairer tip allocation. Then there's requiring employers to take all reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment of their employees. A number of organisations will have been sending out training courses to their employees even now, requiring that sort of training to be put into place. Obligations on employers to not permit the harassment of their employees by third parties. That third party, I guess, could be anyone. To extend that protection to all work environment, including public-facing roles. So there's a potential of having to protect your workers from the general public. And a package of trade union measures, including new rights and protection for trade union representation, extending protections against detriments for taking industrial action, and strengthening trade union rights of access. It's a long list I'm going through here. Then there's into the 2027 requirements that have been announced, which they're moving ahead with, is gender pay gap and menopause action plans. It's voluntary from April 26, mandatory from 27. Enhanced dismissal protections for pregnant women and new mothers. Further harassment protections in relation to sexual harassment, so a strengthening of the measures that employers will have to take. Creating a modern framework for industrial relations to build fairer, more collaborative approach to workplace relations. Bereavement leave comes into play in 2027, giving workers time to grieve with job security. And the ending of the exploitative use of 0 hours contract is now earmarked for April 27 as well. The day one right to protection from unfair dismissal also is 2027, and proving access to flexible working to help people balance work with family, again, is earmarked for 2027. Have I said enough? Is that enough for us to?
A lot of this is going to impact HR as well, or people management, depending what the title is. A lot of this is related to contracts and things like that as well. So perhaps I'll come to you first, Richard. How does this impact the payroll industry? Why, I know we're seeing a lot more collaboration now between payroll and HR anyway, as we move into the modern world of work. But specifically for the people on the call and watching the webinar, Richard, how does this impact payroll?
Well, I guess the biggest one is the one at the top. So the principal position at the moment is we know that the statutory sick pay changes are coming. Whether you pay SSP or not, there is going to be an impact on every business, because even if you OSP above it, you still have to record it. A lot of the others, obviously, either are still in some form of consultation, and we're going to talk about certain maternity and bereavement and the like later on. But it's kind of, and we were speaking about it a little bit beforehand, what we're seeing today may not necessarily be, in a lot of cases, what they end up being. So in principle, we know that the ones next year are going to be pretty much set in stone. But as I said, they sort of roll on and on and on with a number of consultations. So there are a number that will have an impact. As I mentioned, the sickness most definitely. The variations to paternity and the unpaid parental leave will be an amendment, but that will obviously also continue into bereaved parental as well, I'm guessing, while the majority otherwise are far more HR orientated that would require support, I would say is the position. But I think that the true focus of the items at the moment is exactly what the SSP is going to look like. We know the core, but we don't know the detail, unsurprisingly. And I think that's really the drive at the moment for this year. is what's it going to look like. So it is areas like the management of the linking, the transitional process, the calculation of new employees, all of the, I guess, the nuance that sits around the core rules is the application that we need to really get under the skin of it.
Well, I've seen Matthew nodding along there. Matthew, anything you'd like to add from your perspective?
Yeah, as Richard said, we're really waiting for all that detail, which hopefully we should get a little bit more on legislation day, which is coming on Monday. So that is kind of a day where the government sets aside outside of the normal fiscal statements like budgets, where they can sort of absolutely bombard us with consultations and call for evidence before they recess Parliament and go off on holiday, leaving us to pore over all that information. I suppose, touching on your question with HR and payroll linking together, I think one of the big ones that's going to be coming is that implementation of the 0 hours workers and the right to a contract that reflects what you actually work. And in practice, depending on how this comes into effect, because if you've been keeping an eye on the amendments on the Employment Rights Bill, I think it's sort of every other day someone suggests a different amendment for a different reference period or a different sort of terms as to what you would count and what you wouldn't. But it's really going to have a huge administrative burden in terms of making sure that you're collecting the right data to do the right calculations and to comply with that requirement. With that said, we do need to wait to see how the bill sort of finally shapes it and the consultation shapes it, because it could be that it's an employee-led process, in which case there would be less of an onus on businesses to do it. But the way that it was originally set out would be that the onus will be on the business to reach out to offer that contract when certain thresholds were met. But I think in terms of HR payroll relationships, that's going to be a key one that's going to test a lot of businesses if their processes and structures aren't up to snuff.
I think it's a secondary as well if we move outside of payroll and HR, and that's cost. If you look at the SSP, for instance, the SSP costs will go up dramatically. If you're looking at removal of 0 hour contracts, it's setting the right level, because again, it could create. So I think there is certainly a very big budgeting aspect outside of our world, which really as payrollers, we should be driving the knowledge on as well.
Anything you'd like to add, Andy or Sam? I know we've covered a lot there. Let's start with you, Andy. I see you trying to talk. You're on mute, buddy.
Yeah, no, I've put it on mute to avoid any background noise, just in case I've got windows open and traffic noise. Yeah, I mean, from the pension aspects, really, we're going to discuss, I think, later the bereavement and unpaid parental leave, but you really need to know what the scheme rules are, where with legislation, because some parental leave still requires an employer contribution if there's no employee contribution. So it's good to understand where that's going. In terms of 0 hour workers, they're workers, so automatic enrolment will still be applicable. So you've got to be careful on that. Yeah, so really, as always, when you look at it all, just think, what does a pension require? What do my scheme rules say? Does it have an impact? Maybe even have to speak to the pension scheme to find out. And what is legislation enforcing or implying to that as well?
And I guess that secondary cost again with the pension, Andy, because SSP is pensionable.
Yeah.
So where you would have had a lot of people who weren't receiving contributions for those days, it's going to push that one up as well.
Yeah, and also they may trigger now when they wouldn't have done, although obviously the amounts of SSP are small. But yeah, if there's more pay, then from a individual perspective, having more in your pension scheme hopefully will mean you've got a better retirement. But obviously there is an employer cost associated with that, and can that be afforded? And that's why AE thresholds and stuff are all on hold, isn't it? You know, even the Mansions House chat a day back, there's no mention of automatic enrolment, because if you change the the thoughts, bringing down the age and lowering the threshold to nil, that's going to increase the employer cost. And actually, I think Thorsten Bell, the pensions minister, has sort of postponed it for this parliamentary session, it seems.
Yeah.
Who knows?
The IFS pension review launch event a couple of weeks back, Thorsten Bell was there and I attended, and he did confirm that this parliament, there will be no change to the automatic enrolment minimum percentages. So that was one thing that I'm not sure if it had been mentioned anywhere before, but I thought it was quite interesting that at the moment there's a big reluctance to do anything that is going to put additional costs on businesses. So things like that, they're kind of just going, shelve that for now because we don't want to deal with the backlash. Whether that's right or wrong, depends on who you ask. But I think with pensions, it needs to be a much longer term conversation that happens, because with pensions aren't a sort of 5-year plan, they're a sort of decades long plan. And hopefully with the adequacy review that's going to happen soon, there'll be a bit more of a conversation about what that roadmap looks like.
Yeah, it's important for employers to know. Yeah,
exactly. Simon.
Yeah, and I think these are the questions I keep on repeating when some of the consultations are starting or imminently starting, but sometimes the departments that deal with this just deal with one area. There's an element of thinking, what are the other impacts? So on the sick pay, I guess that's one aspect, but on the 0 hours, you've got potential proposals for shift cancellation compensation payments or guaranteed elements of other aspects. And then the question to the government officials, okay, what is the impact on qualifying earnings for pensions? Sort of the element, are they qualifying earnings? Are they earnings that qualify under the working time regulations as part of holiday pay considerations, rolled up holiday pay, or accrual of hours, what happens to them, etc. And it's thinking about what are the other impacts around with all these proposals. The other question that came to mind, I'll ask it because the guys have seen Thorsten recently and I haven't, but in relation to the lower threshold, by the fact that that hasn't risen for some years, the boundary of people getting into auto enrolment is increasing anyway with the increase to a living wage or national living wage. Has he made any mention of what would happen with the lower threshold, or is that part of the same sort of comment? So I've kind of thrown in the question.
Yeah, I think that kind of came into it, and he did mention the sort of, it's obviously not fiscal drag, but it's the sort of same fiscal drag principle that it draws more people into it. And obviously that from a pensions adequacy point of view, that is a good thing. But from a government policy point of view, I don't think there was any mention of doing anything. Obviously, we've had that private members bill that seeks to get rid of that and to lower the age limit for automatic enrolment, and that kind of has been quietly shelved for the same sort of reasons I mentioned earlier. But I don't know if Andy's got any further background to that.
They're very silent on it, aren't they? It was muted that the Chancellor would mention it in the Mansions House speech, but she didn't. So it's a difficult place, isn't it, with the employer national insurance increases? I think the government realise they just can't put any more pressure on employers. So you just keep listening, just have to keep seeing what they say at these various events.
So that's one question here, Andy, that relates to you, is from Carrie. It says, what about changing the age to 18 for pensions? Can you talk about that at all?
Well, I think it's the same thing. And the legislation is there to do it. In simple terms, it's just a case of when. And the when for the lower threshold going to nil and the when for the age going down to 18, we just don't know. The government just aren't talking about it. So we wait to hear, we wait to see. But because of the increase in employer costs because of it, and because of the recent significant increases in employer costs, I'm not sure anything's going to happen this Parliament. If Thorsten Bell is right, and nothing does change, and I think nothing. Well, we've got no changes on automatic enrolment for the next 4 years.
So I want to come to Sam. Sorry, Simon. I'm just aware that Sam, hold that thought, I will come back to you. I'm aware that Sam's been waiting patiently, nodding along, and has a slightly different perspective probably on some of this, because obviously you're managing payrolls on behalf of multiple clients. So I wonder if you want to come in with anything extra perhaps we haven't discussed yet, or just any observations.
Well, I mean, I sort of second everything that Richard said about statutory sick pay. That's at the top of our agenda in terms of looking for what's coming in from next year and understanding how that's going to affect our clients, understanding how it's going to affect the operation of our payrolls. You know, and across the payroll service line, we have 4 different payroll softwares. So, you know, there's a lot to consider for that, as well as the education of the team who are actually delivering the calculations. So I second everything that Richard said there. What interests me particularly about, I mean, everything that's covered in the employment bill roadmap, it's hard to believe that, following up on what Andy's just said, that the government don't really care about employers. But you might as well throw some pension increases in there as well, because there's a fair bit in this employment bill that is going to seriously impact employers. But one thing that I am interested in is the single worker status consultation, and wondering whether we are finally going to see some form of statutory criteria that the courts can use to measure whether or not an individual is a worker, or, you know, how an employer would then be able to define whether somebody is an employee or a worker, or whether or not they're genuinely self-employed and in business in their own right. So I'm interested in seeing that, and also considering, because we don't, I mean, HMRC haven't indicated that they're going to in the slightest bit interested about this single status consultation any more than they were previously. But tax, as we see with national insurance, income tax and national insurance are key drivers to people's behaviour, and the government have no shame in using them as drivers to encourage employer behaviour, particularly national insurance contributions. So it occurs to me that this would be an ideal time for HMRC and the Treasury to get involved again in this discussion and think about how they, in addition to providing balance for employment rights, can also provide balance for employers and employees. One of the arguments for why we have these 3 very distinct definitions of employment rights, so you've got your employee, your worker, LIMB worker, and self-employed, is arguably because of tax reasons. You know, sort of individuals want to pay less tax, employers want to pay less national insurance contributions. So they define different ways of individuals providing their services in a way that kind of minimises their tax burden. So that is always going to be a key driver. So even if we have a single worker status, and I applaud it if we do, that is very clearly defined, is ultimately it's going to change in the future because of the tax system. I think that was the question in my mind as I was looking into the information about this. It's good to see that it's back on the agenda again, but ultimately, will it actually, in the long term, make any difference? So,
thank you, Sam. Thank you. I'm glad I came to you first. Simon, I know he wants to make an extra point. I've got a question I want to ask the group as well, but let's just close this this piece off, and I'll ask our first question that's come in from Mark in just a moment. Simon.
Sure. It was just the point, and it's just a realisation of how the government are working here, because but potentially they're introducing what, if it came in immediately, may be unpopular policy, but it's almost like we're passing law which gives them the ability to do it, but they're going to do it at some point in the future. I'm just thinking, when they do introduce the changes, we'll say, well, now's the time for debate, this is really impacting us, etc. Who's voted for this? And the reality is they can now have the power, certainly with pensions, to implement change that was passed 10 years before, because the power is there now already. It's already gone, but we don't experience the impact. We think, is that some form of new politics where we actually pass the law, but we're not going to do it? And then when they come and do it, it's sort of, but you approved it 10 years ago. We've got the power to do it. And that's in effect what the pension minister has in effect in his hands, isn't it? is the ability to change things which are really fundamental without Parliament not having to do anything.
Yeah, it's an interesting observation. I can see Andy nodding. So I'm going to come to the question because Mark's been very patient with this. He put it in towards the beginning of the conversation. So I'll read it out. Simon, I'll leave it with you just for a minute while your mic is on. We have an employee on UK payroll and we are deducting UK PAYE and national insurance. We have recently discovered during a change of payroll software that the employee has an address that is Republic of Ireland, just off the Northern Ireland ROI border. Should this employee not be on the UK payroll, but rather an ROI payroll, paying ROI tax and PRSI? They are arguing that they have checked with UK HMRC that this is incorrect, and we have requested confirmation that they say they have this from HMRC, stating that this setup is okay. But do you know where we stand on this, please? Regards, Mark.
You're putting that my way, are you, Nick?
I am putting that your way. It's a tricky one, right? It is a tricky one. I guess you probably need HMRC confirmation, but yeah.
I guess there's an element a little bit here of where is the person working and what the cross-border relationships are and where the tax residency is. So having workers in Northern Ireland from Southern Ireland or vice versa is not uncommon. It happens, especially along the borderline, because there is no physical border, is there? It's just a theoretical border. It's a line on a map. There's nothing, there might be a sign on the side of the road saying you're entering one or the other, but for many years there's been nothing there to actually stop anyone. I think there are agreements. It's one I'd have to look up a little bit, Nick. I think there are elements of dependence on where the work is and location and the cross-border instances. And I'm tempted to say I'm in agreement a little bit with their HMRC response, but it's understanding the circumstance of where the individual does the work and lives is just the initial thought that comes to mind. Now, Richard, I'm thinking Richard visits Belfast quite a bit, and I don't know if that's a question or something you come across with your client visits there.
I'll come over to Richard in just a second, but it sounds like from the question, when I'm reading it here, that the employee is clearly working in the UK, would be my assumption. Yes, they're trying to confirm out. Anyway, sorry, Richard, come back to you.
Yeah, pay once, pay where you work is the line, and it is a percentage of time working within an environment. So unless there is a certificate of coverage due to being an assignment from the other country, the start point is pay once, pay where you work. But there are many nuances in relation, especially between obviously the Freedom of Movement Act, etc. But principally, that's the start point. So the initial, I guess, default is if they are working more than 40% of their time in Northern Ireland, then the liability is there in principle. But it's a very nuanced subject, Nick.
Okay, good. Well, hopefully that helps you, Mark. If you have any follow-up questions, please do put it in my questions box. Right, let's get the audience involved. Lots to get through already. We're going to open our first poll, which obviously relates to this first subject we've been discussing. Do you expect SSP in 2026 to impact you financially? For those that are listening to this back in audio only, there are 4 options here: significantly, somewhat, not at all, or doesn't apply to me, so not applicable. So while we get our audience to answer those questions, we're going to be moving in just a moment to the next part of our show, which is going to be changes to parental leave, Northern Irish variation to bereavement as well. So if you have any questions related to parental leave or those changes, start putting them in the questions box now, and we'll obviously do our best to ask those questions in the right subject as we discussed them. So that can be really useful for us. We're going to be talking about the announcements expected in the upcoming party conferences as well. So if you have any predictions yourself as an audience member of this webinar, by all means put them in the questions box, let us know your observations, and I'll read those out as we go as well. So relatively simple poll to begin with here, and actually we've already had some pretty good interaction from most of you, so thank you. Let's have a look at some of these responses. We've got 6% are saying significantly, 51% are saying somewhat, 35% say not at all, and 8% not applicable. Based on those results, let me come to you, Sam. What are your thoughts?
No, that's an interesting. I mean, let's be honest, when we look at the detail of SSP, and we've yet to get more detail, following on from Richard's comments earlier, there's going to be winners and losers with the introduction of with the removal of the lower earnings limit and the 80% or standard rate or 80%, whichever is lower, rule coming into SSP. I think we are going to see, based on the average earnings of employees for particular employers, we are going to see some winners and we are going to see some losers. So that's somewhat at 50%. I think, yeah, this is a good place to sit at this stage of development of SSP, because once we have more information, once we have more detail about how this is all going to follow through, how those linking periods, the moment linking periods link periods of incapacity to work. If somebody's still off sick when the new rules come in, will the new rules continue? Will the old rules continue until that period ends? So I think waiting until we find a little bit more. I think that 37%, I'm assuming that the respondees to this already pay probably equal to or more than statutory sick pay already. So therefore, any changes to statutory sick pay aren't really going to impact them. And that significantly, yes, there's going to be losers in these changes. So that doesn't surprise me, seeing that at all. The not at all, not applicable. Yes, that's by the sounds of it, you are with employers who are already more than generous with your sick pay schemes, or maybe you don't have any employees. I don't know. I haven't thought about it.
Some super observations. Just to follow up from the last question, and Mark came back saying, yes, that is correct. The employee has confirmed that although the address is ROI, they carry out their duties 100% in Northern Ireland. Thanks all. As you quoted, this is a really tricky subject. Right, we've got a couple of other questions that have come in. I'm going to just stick to this one because it's on a similar topic to our last questions. We may as well stay on theme before we jump into the next area. So we said another question comes in from Robert that says, we have employees working in ROI but live in Ireland. They cannot get the tax data required to pay taxes in ROI. I need to be sure we are dealing with the employer's NI liability correctly. Any advice?
Sorry, can you say that one again, Nick?
Yeah, I'll come to you then, Richard. Let me stay with you. He says, we have employees working in but live in Ireland. Okay, they cannot get the tax data required to pay taxes in the Republic of Ireland. I need to be sure we're dealing with the employer's NI liability correctly. So I'm struggling to follow that one as well. If they're in, anyway, I'll come to you, the expert.
But they're in the Republic. They're working in the Republic.
Yeah.
I'm guessing, however, the business isn't a Republic of Ireland business.
That would be my assumption based on what they've written here, which is probably why they're struggling to get the data.
Yeah, I'm guessing it's down to how many people we're talking about, because obviously you would need a Republic of Ireland payroll, but if you're talking about a single person, for instance, they can return on their own quite easily, which is probably the simplest method, with a single or a two-person thing, rather than setting up a process. But I'm sorry, I don't truly understand the question.
That's okay, Robert. If you can give us a little bit more information, we'll do our best to help you with that. It sounds like we might have to add this as a future subject for PQT. We've got a question now for you, Andy. A question on pensions payrolls. We have a dispute. A pensions provider on the jurisdiction of if the pension payment should be paid under HMRC rules or the Republic of Ireland. The member resides in the Republic of Ireland, but the pension scheme is registered with the HMRC.
Well, first of all, some pension schemes don't allow people that aren't in the UK to be members. So you should check the scheme allows Republic of Ireland people to be in the scheme, or any France, whatever, So that's one of those little niche things you've got to be careful about, which kicked in actually for enough Brexit, highlighted it. And then what was the beginning bit of the question?
We have a dispute. A pensions provider on the jurisdiction of if the pension payment should be paid under HMRC rules or the Republic of Ireland, because the member resides in the Republic of Ireland, but the pension scheme is registered with the HMRC.
Sorry, I have to say again, I keep getting feedback. I don't know if it's. I keep hearing two. I can't say.
Well, if I could ask my other panel members just to put yourselves on mute while I just keep myself with Andy, that should hopefully solve the problem. And I'll ask him a third time. So, we have a question on pensions payroll. We have a dispute, a pensions provider on the jurisdiction of if the pensions payment should be paid under HMRC rules or the Republic of Ireland. The member resides in the Republic of Ireland, but the pension scheme is registered with HMRC.
Got it. Yeah. So they're so the individual is a pension scheme member. They've taken their pension now, and they're getting the pension payment made to them under overseas. My immediate thought is it's UK, but you need the discussion needs to be held with HMRC and the pension provider to finalise it, really, because I don't know enough about all the circumstances personally to know that. If it's a large company who's asked this question, they may have an employee benefits consultant firm working for, I don't know, Mercer's, Willis Tower Watson, those sort of companies, and in which case they will have in-depth pension expertise, which will be able to track it down through legislation, although there will obviously be a significant cost potentially for that advice. I don't know if anyone else has got any thoughts on that in the panel.
Well, I'd go similar, but I think we've got some common travel area questions here, which is interesting. And we could do common travel area maybe as a session sometime, although it's specific to Northern Southern Ireland, but also it could apply to former EU workers working in the UK, or I think do they refer to them as frontier workers sometimes, thinking what the application is. But I think at the beginning, Nick, the sort of question back on the first question was, where do they live? Where do they work? I think we've established in that case they're 100% Northern Ireland.
Robert has followed up to say we have an ROI payroll but could not set them up on this. So we're talking about around 10 people. The business they're working for is in the Republic of Ireland. So it might be, I don't know, it sounds to me like maybe an EOR solution might help them here, but yeah.
Exactly. Yes, but generally it's where you work, where the taxation point is predominantly. So workplace, certainly for cross-border in the CTA, it'll be where you work is where it applies. And the pension question, I'm not sure whether it was contribution based or payment based, but and then we talk about HMRC rules, etc. Again, it might be viewed, and I think Andy's right, you need to get professional advice really, maybe again viewed on what is the basis, because we've got UK employees receiving pension all around the world, but generally they'll fall under the UK scheme rule for access to it, not the country where they're resident. So we'll have loads in Canada, Australia, US, etc. They'll get what the scheme rule says for the UK. The HMRC bit was a bit confusing, because the HMRC bit, I guess, is maybe it's the payment of taxation position. I think the individual has to establish that, or you just pay as if they're in UK by default, and they can reclaim back from HMRC. So, for example, if you take out a small pension pot and you're not working, you're going to get taxed on it. Yeah. Now, it may be you're not due to pay tax on it, you claim it back, and etc. And it's knowing those sorts of factors, but where you work is key on a lot of the answers here, I think.
Pension payroll leaders, if you're listening to this, you already know that payroll has never been more complex. Compliance risks are rising, skilled talent is scarce, and getting it wrong can cost your business way more than just money. It can cost you trust, retention, and of course, brand reputation. I'm Nick Day, host of this show and also CEO of JGA Recruitment Group, specialist global payroll recruiters. Here at JGA, we're so passionate about payroll, we've even turned it into music. Don't believe us? Head to your favorite audio platform and search for Payroll Powers the World, and you can quite literally join us in song about how we believe payroll deserves its moment in the boardroom to shine. At JGA, we'd like to think our passion shines through to our recruitment results as well. With a 97% retention rate and an average 19-day job brief to hire success rate, we work fast, we work strategically, and we work with purpose to connect you to the hidden payroll talent that job ads and direct search methods will simply never reach. So if you're hiring or indeed planning to hire, why not partner with the experts that are shaping the future of payroll? Partner with jgarecruitment.com today, or better yet, drop me a message directly, and together we can make sure your next payroll hire is your best one yet.
Yeah, she's coming back to the question in. It's just said it's payment to the pensioner as they believe they should be taxed as per ROI legislation. It seems to me that here we probably need to put this in your survey when it comes through later, and we probably need to have a proper approach and subject matter here. So maybe we'll bring this into the next PQT. Sounds like we need probably a little bit more information, and we can be a bit more generalist in our responses. Andy, I'm sorry.
Well, more importantly, sorry, Tim and Neil. Nick, I keep thinking you're finishing. Apologies. I've got a bit of a delay on you because you're a bit in and out. Yeah, I can bring the right expert on the call as well. If we want to do international, Tim Kelsey can come along and we can have a 5-hour webinar, because we've then got to start, as Simon quite rightly said, you've got frontier working, you've now got obviously home working, where the individual actually has a home in Spain, but the office is in Portugal. Pre-COVID, they were in Portugal, and so on and so forth. You then have the entire issue of permanent establishment. So it is an enormous quantitative area without a set rule, because even the percentages of time spent in country vary country to country to country, and we're probably the worst. So yeah, it's a big fish.
We'll try and bring Tim onto the show. I love Tim, and I'm sure it'll be good to have him on. So let's move the conversation forward then to the next part of today's show. We're going to talk about changes to parental leave, Northern Irish variation to bereavement. Funny enough, I'm talking about Northern Ireland and other questions here. Call for evidence, family leave, Parliament going into recess on 22nd July. And of course, announcements that we expect in the upcoming party conferences. So if anyone has any questions related to these subjects, please do put them in the questions box. Matthew, let me come to you. Perhaps you can give us a bit of an overview.
Yeah, so I suppose Simon kind of covered this earlier. This is going to be forming part of the Employment Rights Bill, but also things like the Northern Irish variation. We've just had an announcement through the Software Developers Support Team with regards to the changes that are going to come in to the FPS and EPS. And this should be something that we get some more information on with legislation day. So hopefully we can really flesh out exactly what these changes are going to bring. But essentially, we're going to have things like pregnancy loss bereavement extended to beyond just where the bereavement happens within the after 24 weeks of pregnancy. So that would be a little bit more of an extension, a bit more of a protection to workers there. The Northern Irish bereavement, and also those day one rights for paternity. I believe today something has been declined as an amendment on the Employment Rights Bill with regards to extending paternity leave beyond the 2 weeks and increasing the rate. So at the moment, there's not really the appetite for further increases. I suppose going along with the conversation we had today, that would increase burdens on employers quite a bit as well. So that might have played a part into those discussions. But at the moment, a few different changes there, but really waiting for those details from Employment Rights Bill, from legislation day. And as it says here, maybe we'll get some more information at the party conferences, which I believe are happening in October for Labour and the Conservative Party.
I guess the Northern Irish ones.
No, you crack on.
Well, no, the Northern Irish ones are probably the most locked down because they wanted to put them in at the start. So, other than that, I'm completely behind what Matthew said.
Yeah, sorry, for the Northern Irish one, just to confirm, I believe that will be coming in April 26th, because that is all confirmed. It was just we had the announcement for implementing that into the systems. So as far as any announcement as to the practicalities of administering that through the payroll, we probably will get guidance further down the line, but for the time being, we know that that's April 26th.
Super. See both Sam and Simon nodding. Sam, anything you'd like to add?
I'd love to add a lot more, but but like Richard, this isn't a subject that I've necessarily done my homework on. One thing that I have recently encountered, though, of course, is the variations between Northern Ireland and Great Britain when we consider statutory payments, or indeed many other employment-related payments, just simply because of the devolved rights that the Northern Ireland Assembly have when it comes to employment rights. So that in itself creates complexity, not only for the employer, but for the payroll professionals and HR professionals who are serving those employers. What would be nice to see, and I know it's out with our control, or indeed anybody's control, because of the way Northern Ireland Assembly have the devolved rights, but it would be good to see more alignment. If we're going to have changes with statutory rights, can we have them together? I think would be my call.
I think going forward, we should have a little bit more alignment here. We had for the past couple of years. It was only just last year that basically the Northern Irish Parliament decided that they wanted to do parliamentary duties again. They kind of had a bit of a boycott, which meant that a lot of these things were kind of put on the back burner. And realistically, they do try and align things like parental leave, even though they have the devolved status with employment law, they do try and align with at least the statutory entitlements. So I hope going forward, we should be a little bit more aligned here. I know that they were trying to.
I'm so pleased I joined. I'm so pleased I joined the panel today. Yeah, that is excellent news indeed.
It is the parentals, because obviously sickness is UK, so the SSP will not have a variation. But it's always GB legislation. I mean, if you look at bereavement is a prime example. So parental bereavement is 2 years. It came in Northern Ireland after, but as Matt said, basically only people at Stormont were the cleaners. So it kind of made it very, very difficult for that to occur. But there are a number of really key ones coming that, it's quite embarrassing to go to Northern Ireland and say, well, we just don't know when you'll get. So I think it's going to have to be something that's more focused on, most definitely.
I know that they were trying to put through.
Sorry, Matthew.
Neonatal. It's okay. They stated their intention that they wanted to put neonatal care leave and pay in Northern Ireland as well. The question with that is, are they going to have the exact same process, which, let's be honest, is a little bit more complex than some of the other statutory leave entitlements, or are they going to come up with their own brand new system for that? I don't know which is more preferable, if I'm honest.
And the sad thing at the moment is there is no statement about neonatal in Northern Ireland. So
no,
just that
but that's realities of devolved governments, isn't it? So on the one hand, we could think we'd hope they all do the same thing. The reason they're devolved governments is because they can choose to not do the same thing. Although, as we're saying, the devolved element here is it's Great Britain versus Northern Ireland, isn't it? Rather than Wales and Scotland, that's another subject. But the oddity about this is because I guess the HMRC announcement to software developers brings in new fields for Northern Ireland for bereavement pay, and it extends it to miscarriage. And where it aligns with Great Britain, the same FPS fields are used for reporting. The new FPS fields are for reporting the Northern Ireland variant. So where they align, you report it the same, and where it's extended to miscarriage, for example, you report it in a different field, because of course the UK government don't want to pay that. They'll send the bill for that to Ireland. The challenge is, of course, and it was almost days later, the government announced that they were bringing in statutory payments for early birth loss, miscarriage. So is it almost an element of, did they wake up and think, oh, Northern Ireland, we're a bit behind. They've now leapfrogged us with a right. We'll catch up. So is it now that Great Britain is catching up with Northern Ireland on that aspect? But the other aspect is almost within days also, they just announced well, I'll tell you what, we'll just throw the whole lot up in the air and see where it falls. So you've now got this consultation where they're saying, actually, because when you compare parental rights in the UK, for example, with Sweden, Norway, Denmark, some of the other European nations that are quite close or friendly neighbours in the past, we're a bit behind. So there may be an element of thinking, do we actually want to expand parental rights even more and be more supportive of family and life? Because you've got this oddity of we're all required to work almost today, and we've got all this childcare. But if your child's had diarrhea or sick, they won't allow them to go for 48 hours. So what do you do? So it's an element of, on the one hand, we're making former social life more that everyone can work, to points of the child is ill, they can't work, and the support is poor when that happens. Do you see where I'm coming from? And it's an element of, are we going to just reinvent the whole thing and scrap it and start again? And that's, I guess, the thought process of what they're doing with the review of parental leave.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with that. But the one thing I noticed was a comment in relation to that call for evidence and that kind of taking a look at the family leave. And I mean, it would be great to see greater alignment, sort of total 100% alignment wherever possible. Day one rights, for example. I don't know why 26 weeks was selected as the earnings period into the qualifying week or into the relevant week in the first place. I don't know why 26 weeks was selected, but is it time that we revisited that 26 weeks and think in this modern workplace, is that still an accurate figure to have? But one thing I did spot in my homework for today was the fact that the government don't seem keen in this early call for evidence to add any costs either to the employer or, more importantly, to the exchequer. So that says to me they're not looking at revisiting the rates. They're not really looking at revisiting any additional payments. So it's just maybe understanding how the systems work, and that was something I found interesting. It was one of the aims of the call for evidence was understanding this is government's understanding of how it works. And I'm thinking, well, if government don't understand how a system works when they've designed it, there's no hope for the rest of us, really. But I'm keen to see, as a result of this in early call for evidence and any subsequent consultations that follow on, greater alignment with the statutory payments and statutory leave entitlements, because there seem to be more and more of them. As you say, Simon, we are required to work. As a result of being required to work, there has to be provision to cover those times when we need to be away from work. So, you know, without us losing out too significantly. If we just pick up on neonatal, and sorry, I will stop talking in a minute, Nick, I promise. But if we pick up on neonatal, which came in this year for Great Britain, then within a couple of days of me delivering training to the team on the rules of neonatal, I heard we had 3 different clients who had employees with children in neonatal care. All of these 3 employees had accrued at least a week of neonatal leave at the last point I spoke to them. So I spoke to each of the team members who were dealing with them and asked the question, well, do you think they'll be taking this neonatal leave? No, they're not taking it. They can't afford to take the leave. You know, it doesn't pay enough. That was the message I was getting. So the employee would still rely on holiday pay or the generosity of their employer. Now, granted, they have up to 68 weeks to take that leave, so they might change their mind in the future. But then at that earliest stage, they were already making the decision, it's not paying enough, we can't take the time. So, you know, it's nice that these rights are brought in. And these rights, particularly with neonatal, were brought in as a result of significant campaigning. But if the rate isn't going to be payable at a rate that is livable on, that sentence made no sense whatsoever, but I hope you got the gist of it. If it's not enough for somebody to say, okay, I can take a week out, and have the statutory pay, then it's actually it's not worth the paper it's written on, really. So whilst the government aren't keen on looking at increasing its cost, I hope they will revisit the rates that they pay.
I think it goes back to Matthew's statement, doesn't it? They're scared to death of charging employers any more money at the moment. Cost is just not.
I'm conscious of time, so let's move on to the next section of the show. There's a lot of our audience keen to hear more about the student loans area. Plan 5 being the default option from 2025, and there's some questions around those who live in devolved nations, Wales and Scotland, default to go on to English Plan 5. For those not familiar, I'm going to come to Simon to give me a bit of an overview here to bring everybody up to speed.
Yeah, so new legislation is out on Plan 5 student loans. They've been around now for a good number of years, but none have been in repayment because none of the students who received it would have graduated, but they'll have been graduating now. In fact, I was passing the Manchester Opera House or whatever it is there near Deansgate, and you've got all of the Manchester Met graduates all in their gowns and etc. Hoods and hats parading around. Those will all have Plan 5 student loans, or a lot of them will. They're not due for repayment yet. So they're graduating now, the course is finished now. They'll trigger a start point in April 6th, 2026. And Plan 5 will be the default plan. The oddity about this legislation, I think, as we're kind of implying, is it applies across Great Britain or the United Kingdom. So the new starter form is out. I believe there are some draft versions around under consultation for completion of it. But I imagine that lots of your starters don't know what plan they're on. Even if they've got a Plan 5, they don't know. So they'll tick they've got a student loan, and they're thinking, what on earth are these questions about? I don't understand them. So they'll answer nothing. So once they've done that, the legislation requires that Plan 5 takes priority. So even if they're Welsh, never left Wales, went to Welsh University, but I don't know what plan I'm on, it's probably Plan 2, they'll be put on Plan 5 initially with HMRC issuing the instruction. So that's just an element of thinking. The threshold for Plan 5 is already set. It's £25,000. That's set in legislation. It's not changing in April 26. The other planned thresholds should be revealed, I would hope, over the next month, if not 2 months. And the implication from the student loan civil servants, as far as I'm aware, is they said we'd go away from this trickle announcement we've had over the past 3 years. So it will go back to the old format of all of them, including those required approval from the Welsh Parliament, to be announced at the end of the summer. So if that is, we should know some of those thresholds could change, but for Plan 5, it's £25,000, 6% contribution rate, comes in April the 6th, 2026, for those graduating now.
Excellent. Anyone like to add to that, Matthew? I saw you nodding along and follow on. I've got Richard put a hand up on that. You're doing some cool thing.
I'm just saying, I think there's a couple of things here. I mean, this year could be the first where we see change to the postgraduate, which obviously has never had a statute instrument behind it. But the big thing I think at the moment is going to be the new starter checklist changes. They are desperately working on new versions that are far more, I guess, broken down in relation to answering the question as to which one people have. So they're looking at making it a lot more granular. So if you studied in Wales, it's so they are looking to make it a bit more geographic. So it will be, I think, looking at the drafts, it's going to be a lot more easy, hopefully, to make that check off as to which one it is. But as Simon quite rightly said, historically, you defaulted to Plan 1. You're now going to default to Plan 5, and you may never have set foot in England because remember, it's an England only scheme. So
right. I think everyone was nodding along. I saw all three of you nodding in unison there, Richard, as you said that. Matthew, anything you wanted to add? I saw you nodding along before as well, before we move on.
I was just nodding along because I wasn't aware that they planned to do a dump of all of the rates in one go rather than the trickle that they've done the past few years. So I was just sort of learning some stuff from Simon, which is always fantastic.
we're being
Super. Well,
spoiled, Matthew.
Well, I know. Let's move on then to enforcement and compliance updates. There's a few things here to cover: national minimum wage, dispute charges, interest accounts, and may cross over with the Fair Work Agency in the future. Who would like to take the lead here? Who shall I point out? I'll come to Simon for the last couple. I'll come to Richard. So Matthew, let me come back to you, if I may.
Yeah, go for it. I suppose one of the things that's sort of close to my heart, if you don't mind jumping into the disputed charges. So they've now decided to settle back on the disputed charges team, or rather than the charge resolution team. I think that's right. And essentially, there's a lot of work going on there at the moment. And this is something that sort of I looked at over the past year with regards to sort of RTI discrepancies that have been happening on allocation into the sort of RTI accounts on HMRC's side. And there's a lot of things that happen with regards to incorrect information going across to HMRC. That's HMRC's story. They're very focused at the moment on education in that space, in terms of don't have a date of birth, don't put one in. If you don't have a national insurance number, don't put one in, because if you do put one in, it can create duplicate records. That's a huge part of HMRC's education piece at the moment. But last week, I was able to speak to a couple of representatives from the sort of disputed charges team, who were going through some of the changes that they're making with the current system. And they're trying to implement a G form where people can contact them directly in order to get those disputed charges looked at, rather than going through the employer helpline, because I'm sure we don't need to discuss how long it can take people to get through on the employer helpline. But also, one of the big things, and it's actually something that in a roundabout way I kind of suggested and asked for in the RTI report that I did, was that you allow employers the ability to look over the information that HMRC holds. And one of the things that they're actually doing at the moment is, once you have confirmed that you're happy to have information sent by email, HMRC will provide you with some details of what they hold in the RTI account. And then the onus is on the employer to search for the discrepancies and the issues within that data. Now, it's a fairly low-tech version. There's no online portal. There's no going through your tax account. But at the same time, I think it's a good step forward that allows employers the sort of overview of that data to be able to find the discrepancies. Now, it doesn't mean that they can just resolve them straight away. They still have to sort of let the disputed charges team know and work through what the resolutions are. But I think that's a very good step in terms of having that two-way conversation, rather than just bashing your head against a wall with HMRC because you've got a problem that no one can identify because they won't share data with you. So I think credit where credit's due. I think that's a good step forward.
Super helpful. Sam, I can see you have something you want to add to this. I can tell, so let me come to you.
Sorry, unmuted myself. Yes, interesting. And hey, every day is a learning day in payroll, isn't it? So this is good news. This is great news to hear, Matthew. And but it just, as you were speaking then, I was getting a bit of a flashback to the good old days pre-RTI, when you could actually speak to a local tax office if things weren't balancing, and at the end of the year they would share what they had, and you would look at it, and you would trickle down and figure out what had gone wrong maybe 3 tax years earlier. So it is a positive step forward, but at the same time it's a nod to how things could work well in the olden days. So I've got mixed feelings about this. I think it's good news if it's helping the employer get to grips or get to the bottom of a disputed charge, then all to the good. Why? Another part of my brain is going, why is it taking so long to get to this point? I'm sure Simon's got an informed view on why that might be the case, but slightly infuriating, but that's good news. Thank you, Matt. You've made my day there. You've made my day. I'm saying that Karen might be screaming because she might be thinking, hang on a minute, we're not going to be doing this. But from an employer perspective, I think that's good news. Good news indeed.
Fantastic. Anything you'd like to add, Andy or Simon? No,
you'll know me, Nick. I'm always happy to add loads.
I'm very aware.
Yes, it's interesting. Yeah. So disputes. Yeah. Some years ago, we had the name changed to charge resolution because employers were reluctant to dispute HMRC, and they saw that as a black mark against them as an employer, and they didn't want inspections taking place as a result of disputing with them. So the name was changed to the charge resolution cases. The team never changed their name. I think they're always called the dispute team that handled them, but magically the change of name has disappeared. So it's now dispute resolution or dispute charges again. As I say, the new form, I believe, is due within a couple of weeks. Hopefully, we'll see what happens. But when you phone up now, they won't raise a charge dispute or dispute case. They'll initially provide you with the data if you convince them to, and then you can. They're saying that 80% of cases, I believe, from my recollection of discussions with them, are resolved by employers themselves once they know what the data is. But as Sam has indicated, up until 2012, you as an employer, if you're submitting your information via EDI or magnetic tape, would have had a P35 MT sent to you, which would have given you a copy, or a CS, which would have given you a copy of all of your end of year data that have been submitted. At the moment, you've got absolutely no idea what HMRC hold on your employee accounts, whether they're right, wrong or not, whether there's duplicates, no idea without giving sight. And it's been a secret society to the extent that there's been a lot of reluctance to actually let you see. In the early days, I'm going to say, you'd raise a charge resolution case, they'd go away, and then magically it seemed to fix itself. And of course, they haven't found a problem. And the suspicion is, oh, they've spotted all the duplicates themselves and got rid of them, and now the account balances. Oh, whoopee, that's magic, isn't it? But deny that anything's actually happened. These days, I think we've got such a queue that there are years of waiting for those that have got a problem, which is concern. But having met some of the officials in HMRC that now deal with this, some of them are relatively new, they have a desire to make it better, which is great news.
Excellent. Richard, I'm going to be coming back to Simon in a minute to talk about the SD Worx Academy. So I wonder if you want us to add any thoughts there before we move forward.
No, I think it's all been said.
Great. So before we go to the SD Worx Academy, Andy, I would like to come to you to see if there's any pension updates you'd like to update our audience with. Anything else we need to be considering since we last spoke? I know we didn't have you in your fullness last time due to connectivity problems and other few things. So any updates on the pension side before we go to the SD Worx Academy?
No, not really, because it's all what we thought was going to be might have been mentioned in Mansion's House speech. Hasn't happened. Obviously, the pension schemes bill is going through Parliament, second reading, and so on has been taking place. So depends how interested you are in the pension schemes bill, whether you want to listen to Parliament TV and listen to the reading. The Lords are quite good. I like the way that they debate it. I'm sad that I listened to it, but it's exciting stuff for me. No, there's a lot of stuff coming up with the pension scheme bill, value for money, small pots being consolidated. So there's that. And I think last time I put in the chat the roadmap for pensions. So if you haven't got it, please just search roadmap for pensions, pension schemes roadmap, go to the gov.uk, there'll be a link there, and then you can see the things that are coming up in these coming years. and hopefully at some point we'll find out what's going on with AE. That's me.
Very good. Very good. Well, listen, let's jump then to the... Actually, no, I've had a comment come in. We could jump to that first. It says, Carrie said, great steps. I had to request RTI data information and it took 9 weeks to get the information. So just an observation there. And look at that. Panel all nodding again in unison is what we like to see. Well, let's move over to the SD Worx Academy then. For those that are interested in signing up to some excellent courses, there's a number that may grab your attention. And we're going to highlight all of these today because there is, in case you're not aware, no PQT in August. So you've got plenty of opportunity now to give us your feedback, to let us know what you want us to be talking about when we come back in September. The upcoming courses, we have on the 19th of August, we've got UK Payroll Part 1, that's income tax and national insurance. 20th of August, UK Payroll Part 2, starters and leavers, student loans and statutory payments. 22nd of August, salary sacrifice, what is it and why? 19th September, holiday pay, understanding entitlement, accrual pay and rolled up pay. All hot topics we've discussed in detail during previous PQTs. But Simon, I wonder if you could just let the audience know a little bit more about the SD Worx Academy and what they may expect if they want to sign up.
Yeah, sure. The SD Worx Academy, it's an online academy. It's a learning management system. Feel free. We've got some great trainers. Me being one of them, of course. No, I don't do self-promotion. Julie Northover that does our payroll training for us as well, which is a great resource if you want to learn about it, especially associated with those who are aligned with the services we've provided, but they're not limited to that. Those that use SD Worx users, anybody can join them. Important questions in relation to salary sacrifice. They're really complicated. I've had some calls with some clients today. And it's just a reminder, Nick, the payment deadline for Class 1A is next Tuesday. So get your Class 1A sorted. And for those of you who are payrolling, remember, you need to have made the adjustment on the P11 DB and get those money paid over. This really warps the head on how these things are handled, is what I find. The common man will not readily understand it. So it's one of the reasons why we're payroll professionals. Get our head round it if you're new of it and tackle, but you've got an impending deadline. And I'm aware of some employers who have received letters for HMRC asking why they've returned on their FPS forms millions of pounds of BIC with the BIC marker, yet there is no Class 1A payment, because people are thinking the payroll will do it all. It can't, and it won't until 27, because there is no means provided by HMRC. Remember your Class 1A. Sorry, I've thrown in a bit of a compliance reminder there, Nick.
No, always helpful, I'm sure. And while I've got everybody here, we haven't launched it yet, but keep your eyes peeled on LinkedIn for a sign up to a webinar I'm going to be facilitating, which is going to be on the 30th of July, which is the Global Payroll Blind Spots. Are you losing millions without knowing it? So very much for a global payroll audience. We've got some really interesting speakers which we're lining up. So keep your eyes peeled. It's going to be on the 30th of July at 4 o'clock. It'd be great to see you all again at that time. The next PQT, keep your eyes peeled on that as well. You can go to sdworx.co.uk/PQT to sign up for the next one. It's going to be on the 18th of September. So plenty of time to sign up, plenty of time to give us your feedback, plenty of time to let us know what you want us to be talking about in that show. So please do give us all of those surveys with anything you want us to cover. Now we've got a couple of minutes spare. I've just put a little link into the chat for anyone that's interested. We did launch a new website called payrolhrsalary.com. You can get some free codes to work out what your worth is in payroll. So if over the August months you want to find out what you're worth, go and take a look at that. There's also time for some hot topics. So maybe I'll come to you first, Matthew, because the CIPP is always a lively site for payroll professionals. Anything you want us to bring up to the audience, for the audience's attention, that maybe we can highlight today? Oh, you're on mute, buddy.
That's good. Thanks. Still putting me on the spot. I've still not thought of anything to actually say here, but I suppose for us, we're hopefully busy next week with legislation day, so keep an eye out on our news page and our social media platforms for any breaking news from legislation day. And I suppose the next big events for us coming up are National Payroll Week at the start of September and our conference at the start of October. So if you fancy coming along to our conference, I believe there's still tickets available. So head over to our website and have a look at how you can get involved in that.
Super. And Richard, Payroll Centre, equally active, always offering great resources to the payroll community. Anything you wanted to raise or bring up for our audience today?
Absolutely. I think it is what we said probably right at the very start. We are at a bit of a precipice around a number of very key changes to what we're going to do. Dear government, please give us some guidance as soon as you can, because otherwise Simon Parsons is going to come and knock on your door.
That's what you wish for.
Yeah, at the moment, yeah. So, probably our biggest sort of thing outside of the norm at the moment is half-day assistance. So whether it be payroll and benefits, whether it's going to be the SSP, there's just so much that people need to get their head around at the moment. And again, the detail within them is so important.
Couldn't agree more. That's why Academy is so useful. Anything you'd like to add, Sam, Simon, or Andy, before we sign off for today?
I'd just like to talk about guidance on gov.uk, and I'm going to, Richard mentioned the starter checklist earlier, and prior to us going live, I said, oh, right, on the subject of starter checklist, why can't we just get rid of the P45? And the reason I say that, I mean, after 45 years in payroll, I would be lost without the P45, I assure you. However, it occurs to me that the guidance that once existed when I first started as a happy little chappie at 16, I could pick up clear guidance on the subject of P45 checks, and I could follow it, and I could apply it, and I could apply it consistently. These days, you go on gov.uk and try to find clear guidance on what to do with the P45 when you get it for a new employee, particularly relating to the checking of a P45. Now, for people who are new to the profession, they may not even think about checking a P45 because they're using software, they'll input the information to the software will do its thing, and it's not until later when they maybe get asked a question on an ACT assessment, thank you Richard, on the P45 check-in that they'll look at guidance and they'll think, hang on a minute, what's this all about? I didn't know anything about this check-in. The guidance isn't clear. So I have one of two questions to ask. Either A, can we have better guidance, or B, can we get rid of the P45? Because arguably it doesn't have quite the same urgency that it once did. It certainly doesn't have the same job it once did prior to real-time information. So that's my final, and thank you very much for having me, by the way. So
it's been good to have you back. It's been good to have you back. Well, look, I want to give a big thank you to our audience as well, who've been joining us for a number of years now for every episode, whether it's 70 of you that is on the call right now to sometimes 400 or 500 of you that join us. I wish you all a wonderful summer holiday, whatever you may be doing. I hope if you work in payroll, you have the time and possibility to take a holiday, and I hope your payrolls can run accurately and compliantly and on time in your absences. But in the meantime, I want to give a huge thank you for joining us today. My name's been Nick Day. I've loved facilitating the show, but it's really the experts and funds for me that make it happen. So Matthew, Richard, Simon, Andy, Sam, I wish you all a great summer as well. Thank you once again for joining us, and I look forward to bringing you all back to the show on Tuesday or Thursday, the 18th of September. Thank you all. Have a wonderful summer holiday.